We're going to be looking at some data sets coming from the Slave Voyages database. And the data sets we're going to be looking at are data sets related to names. We're going to be looking at some roots, and we're going to also be looking at some origins and some destinations with respect to these name roots. And so we're going to be looking at variants of that Maur name. And so we're going to be looking at M-A-U-R, M-I-R, M-O-O-R, M-O-R, M-U-R, Maroon, and then we're going to be looking at some additional dynamics. Now, what appears to be going on is that during the 1800s, when slavery was supposed to be outlawed in terms of the transatlantic dynamic, there was a movement of people from the West into Africa, and also a movement of people within the continent. And so there was transport from what would be understood as the slave coast into Sierra Leone. And so we're going to be looking at this data and what the implications might be. Because what it looks like is very clearly you have something that looks like sort of a Spain, Portugal, Rome, France, Brazil confederacy involved in this people movement. But you have Britain actually establishing the colony. What's also noteworthy is that this British colony that was established by these Christian missionaries. However, the overwhelming majority of people in the area happen to be Muslim, and this coincides with this movement of people within the continent of Africa based upon these slave ship captures. So we're going to look at this data, and then you can come to your own conclusions or come up with your own questions about this dynamic. And to get us started with this examination, this is an article that you might want to check out related to Islam and education in the colony and hinterland of Sierra Leone, starting in 1750 through 1914. We're going to start off looking at the name Maroon. Now this is interesting because Maroon is a name given to a collective of people. The name is supposed to coincide with individuals who escaped slavery in the Americas. You see here that the origin for one individual named Cameroon was Calabar, and then you see a number of embarkation sites. What's interesting is you have one embarkation site, which is Sierra Leone. You also have the Gambia. But ultimately, the disembarkation is in Freetown. Now, what's not clear is why Maroons would be on slave ships moving between African ports when the theory is that the Maroons were in the Americas. So now we're going to look at names that have the M-O-O-R, and you can see that there is quite a bit of variety here. You see embarkation at Bonny. You also see Lagos mentioned here. You see a number of variants. You see Morde, Moree, Lamoureux. So you see quite a bit of variety here in terms of this name. These ships, by and large, are Iberian ships. And of course, you have this relationship between Iberia and the west coast of Africa, and also ports in the United States and also in the rest of the Americas, specifically Brazil, of course. And so these names with the Maur root appear to be related to places such as Spain and Portugal and France and Brazil, and also the west coast of Africa. And here you see additional names with the M-O-O-R. You see many variations here. You see Moree, Maur. You even see John Moore, Maura. You see in addition to what we previously saw for embarkation, you've got Mozambique added, Bimbia. You even have the Gulf of Guinea Islands. And so they were transporting people from various places in and around Africa into Freetown. And here are some additional examples. You also see the variant of simply MOR within a variety of names. Again, this is correlated with ships that are related to Portugal, Spain, Iberia. You see the origin of the people, including the Hausa, Calabar, Mandingo, Fula, Igbo. Again, there's a question of whether this was actually a part of a slave trade or whether this was a part of a settlement process. Here you have additional names with these Iberian ships, and by Iberian we are talking about Portugal, Spain. We're also talking about the entire Latin dynamic that was going on in Europe with respect to the slave trade. And so again, you have a number of names with the MOR, and you have a variety in terms of embarkation spots, all going to Freetown. Now, these lists are not exhaustive because the actual database contains far more names than the ones that we are looking at. However, these are some samples. And so you see samples of names with the MUR, and these are largely coming out of the Bight of Benin. Additional MUR roots, again, coming out of the Bight of Benin, again, associated with Iberia, going to Freetown. Here you have additional MUR roots, and you see them coming out of Bani, Porto Novo. You've got them coming out of Lagos. You have quite a variety here. Some actually going to Freetown, but then you have many individuals landing in Havana, and this is in the 1800s. Here are additional ones with the MUR. There are quite a few with the MUR, by the way. And so you have quite a few here coming out of Lagos and Bight of Benin, again, landing in Freetown. And now you can see a number of names with the MAUR. Now, interestingly, these individuals are embarking in Bani and Rio Pongo. But if you note, they are largely landing in Havana. And if you look in the middle, you can see the origin of the people. And you see quite a bit of variety in terms of the origin. But what is consistent is that you have these Latin-based ship names. Switching now to the MAR route, you see quite a bit of embarkation in terms of Bani. You see Cameroon River, Porto Novo. You see Lagos, but you see this disembarkation at Freetown also. You also see the origin of the people, including Calabar and Igbo. These are additional MAR names, and you see specifically one ship named Iberia. This was in 1835. Again, these are all 1800s, but again, you see these Latin-rooted names. They are all going basically to Freetown. Additional individuals with the MIR root, and you see the origin listed. The only ones we have are Igbo for these individuals. Many of them don't have an origin listed. But again, you see these Iberian or Latin ships, and these individuals are going to Freetown. In addition to the Moor, Muir, Mir, Mur root, you also have names that have Muhammad in the name. And so you only see one origin for these individuals, but you see them coming out of a variety of places, including the Gambia and Lagos. These individuals are going into Freetown, but you also see a notation for an individual embarking in Lagos and ending up in Havana. And here you see additional routes. You have interesting slave ship names like Semiramis. You see individuals coming out of Lagos and ultimately ending up in Freetown. Now, at the same time that you have these individuals migrating from one part of Africa to another with this Moor root, you also have this name Maroon, uh, coming out of Europe and then into the Americas. Now, this is a Norman rooted name, also an Irish rooted name. We've talked about the need to operationalize the word Moor, Mar, all of the variants each time we see it, because in some instances you have what looks like a clear indication of religion in terms of the name and the affiliation. However, when you're talking about the name in Europe, and you're talking about Western Europe, you're talking about the Isles, that M-A-R and M-O-R have another meaning, and that meaning is about quantity or quality, and it's about greatness. And so M-O-R is another way to say head, leader, great. And you see the same dynamic with the M-A-R, and you see this in this particular instance. And so what you also see associated with this name is that when you look in the United States, this name is basically the root for Marriott. And so you also see the word Mormon associated with this Moor, Mar, Mur. And here you can see these settlers with this Maroon surname coming into the United States in the 1800s. And so, of course, this raises the question about what is the relationship between the Moors and those with these surnames: Moran, Marone, Marriott, Mormon, Moravian. It is interesting to note that religious groups such as Moravian and Mormon, they are identified as Christian, but the type of Christianity sometimes varies significantly from what would be considered mainstream Protestant Christianity. And so again, this brings up the question of what is the relationship between these particular religious groups and those who are identified as Moor. Is this some sort of syncretic dynamic going on with respect to the Moors, the Moravians, and the Mormon? It also helps to analyze the sources in terms of this data. And one thing that you might note is that the majority of the data is coming out of Great Britain. Now, this might be attributed to the fact that it was Sierra Leone that was receiving. However, that's not completely clear. And so what you also have here is this dynamic of these Christian missionaries establishing this colony on the west coast of Africa, but then filling the colony with individuals who appear to be Islamic. And so there are some questions about how this entire dynamic came about, because right now you have Sierra Leone primarily being Islamic. However, its foundation was primarily Christian in terms of the people who were purportedly creating this establishment. You have the same dynamic in some other places, but you have this Christian missionary society by and large orchestrating this entire dynamic. And so this does not really look like it's about moving captured slave ships into Sierra Leone and establishing this colony. It looks like there was a transport of people from one part of Africa to another in an effort to create this settlement, to create this colony. And a question, of course, to answer is why? Because again, you have this confederacy with the Spain, Portugal, Italy, France dynamic, and Britain. As we wrap this up, a few questions emerge. One question is, why were the individuals all going into Sierra Leone and no one going into Liberia? That's one question. Another question is, why was Great Britain integral to this entire process? And what was Great Britain's investment in transporting these individuals who were identified basically as Islamic? Why were they instrumental in transporting these individuals from one part of Africa into another part of Africa to establish this settlement? What was the end game? What was the ultimate purpose? Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.